Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sir Chief Dude, and welcome to episode 5 of my Let's Play Kerbal Space Program series. As you can see, we are structuring this episode a little bit differently now. With the way that the mid to late game goes here, I've decided that it'd be better for me to record the episode, do all the video editing, and then record post-commentary over it. So that way I have a lot more control over the length of my episodes. As you'll see, this one's only about 16 minutes long, whereas my episodes progressively got longer until I started to really cut them down with episode 4. That was the first one I really did some major editing in. But as you'll see, things are going to go a lot differently here. What I just finished doing was building my first probe, so to speak. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to fulfill 2 contracts. One of them was to test these radial engines at a certain altitude on a suborbital hop, and the other one was simply to gather science from Kerbal. I was going to try and get both of those in one flight. As you'll see here, that doesn't quite go to plan. This rocket doesn't quite have enough delta V to get to the altitude I needed, but it's not a total loss. I did manage to get my science contract complete. So right now we're just doing a typical launch, solid rocket booster first stage, and then we're lighting these radial engines to get us up there. I really tried to get up to that 220,000 meter altitude, but I didn't give myself as much delta V as I needed. So we're going to go straight up. Engines are going to burn out, and then we're going to fall right back down. I didn't put a heat shield on this because I didn't think I would need it, and luckily for me, we didn't get high enough that I did need it. However, once I do complete the contract with the next design, you'll see that I would have needed the heat shield if I would have gotten high enough. So right now we're just grabbing that science. It's not worth any actual science data points for me, but just having that and recovering that at the end of the rocket launch will fulfill that contract for me. So right now we're descending right back through the atmosphere. I moved the parachutes over to the stage so that my drogue chutes would fire first, because I forgot to do that in the vehicle assembly building. So here we go. I'm trying to shake the rocket around to lose that excess velocity, because I wasn't sure if I was going to slow down in time. But as you can see right here, drogue chutes go, and then my main chutes. And so right now we're going to go to 4 times video speed here so that this doesn't drag out. Because boy, that's the one downside of this game, is watching your rockets fall the last 500 meters on parachutes, because it just takes so long. Alright, so we're going to recover that vessel, go back to the vehicle assembly building, and modify our design a little bit. So this first one was RSS-1, which is Radial Science Ship 1, and this next one will be RSS-2. And so I also, you may have noticed, picked up a contract to test the what are they called? The launch clamps. But for some reason the game's bugging out, and throughout this entire episode I try a couple more times to go and fix it, but for some reason it won't let me use the launch clamps, even though I have them unlocked, and I just went and purchased them again. So I think there's a bug in the game somewhere. I'm going to see if I can go into the game files and see if there's like duplicates or something that's preventing that from working. So this time we go all the way up. My apoapse right now is about 218 kilometers, which is perfect for the contract. So I get up there, run my test. It's like, yay, you completed the contract, and here we go. Heading back down through the atmosphere, I give my rockets a quick fire to use up the rest of the fuel and slow me down. And then we descend with that heat shield taking quite a bit of a beating on that sharp re-entry. And again, going straight back down and making our landing. So we're going to recover the vessel, and it's going to take us back to the Space Center here, where once it loads, nothing happened, got our science and our funds. We're up to over half a million funds, so we went and upgraded the tracking station, and now we'll have the full benefits of our trajectories mod, which gives us our trajectory through the atmosphere with our aircraft and spacecraft. So we go to mission control to see if there's any new contracts we can pick up, and we see a satellite contract, but we decide not to take it quite yet. So here we go, getting ready for our next launch. We skip ahead a week until our alarm clock goes off. And once we are able to do our next launch, we decide we're going to go with Eclipse 2 as the next mission we decide to complete. So we're going to get rid of this little thing. We're going to go back, pull out Eclipse 1. We got to make a few changes to it. We've unlocked some parts that we can use, and we're going to add ourselves a well, first we're going to upgrade the launch pad because we realized that our spacecraft's going to be too heavy to launch. So we had the funds and we upgraded the launch pad. Now we can add these big old SRBs to the side and strut them on. But then we realize we still don't have quite as much Delta V as we'd like, so we go back and we add a little bit more fuel on top, restrut those solid rocket boosters, and we are good to go. So again, we're going to launch this one. It's nothing you guys really haven't seen before, so we're going to keep this sped up as well. As far as things go, it's a normal launch. First stage fires, separates those boosters. Then we're going to tilt over to the east, get our apoaps. I think we're going straight for a 250 kilometer injection burn before we circularize. So this is just going to be a nice steady burn straight off to the east. Watching our apoaps rise and rise. And stage separation. Now we're on our upper stage engine, and this is the one that packs all that Delta V. So we get all the way up there, and I foolishly decide to time warp, and I miss my apoaps. So I go back down, realize I forgot to circularize, and I get my periaps out of the atmosphere. So we are officially in high orbit, which officially completes our Eclipse 2 contract. So we went, grabbed our atmospheric science data, and then we decided to go burn to get ourselves back into the atmosphere. Originally, I was aiming using the trajectories mod to get us back down at the Space Center, but I forgot the way that it calculates it is based off your current rocket. So once I jettisoned that, it changed my trajectory very much. And then back in the atmosphere, I almost do something very, very stupid and very, very costly. You got to be very careful when flying through the atmosphere not to press any keys, because if you do, this happens. Yeah. You saw just how close my rocket was to overheating, and Jeb completely... Well, that would have been a bad day for Jeb, but he's still having a wonderful time. He has no idea what just happened. But yeah, I fat-fingered one of the keys, and my rocket decided to take a spin at 2.5 kilometers per second, and re-entry heating is not friendly. So once I recovered from that heart attack, we get back down to the surface, and then we recover our spacecraft in the water. However, this doesn't happen without me realizing that one of the things that exploded in that incident was my barometer, and I never collected the data, so I lost that science data, which was a wonderful time. I do notice that Jeb did get a ribbon for, I think it's a solid rocket booster. Yeah, 20% of the spacecraft was an SRB at launch, so he gets a ribbon for that, I guess. because what's better than sitting on top of a giant explosive device? So here we are back in the research and development facility. I went and buy that launch clamp again to try and fix the problem, but it still doesn't happen. And finally, aha, position a satellite in specific orbit of Kerbin. That's the contract we need to take. And officially, this was going to be my attempt at my first unmanned paper contract or mission, Relay 1. So what I do is, again, sped up the building process because nothing too interesting is going on here. We're adding power, adding a reaction wheel, service bay with the reaction wheel inside the service bay, 4 batteries, a couple antennas on the side so that we have communication. And then we add that little nose cone we added decoupler to so that once we're in space we can jettison the extra weight. That'll give us a little bit more delta V, although as time will show, we don't actually end up needing it. But yes, as you see, I titled the spacecraft Relay 1, which was going to be our first ComSat, because originally when I typed up that mission, the mission list, I was originally going to use a mod called Remote Tech, which is basically a challenge enhancer for probes. What it does is it adds this whole new element to the game where your probes can only function if they have a line of sight radio signal back to the space center. So what you have to do at some point in the game is set up a relay network in synchronous orbit of Kerbin, so that you, no matter where you're at in the system, you'll have a direct link back to the space center with your communications. Otherwise, your probes are dead in space. So that's where that whole mission came from. But I decided if I can collect a contract, I'll keep those on there. And so we'll have Relay 1, 2, and 3, which I'm going to do at some point. Basically, it just guarantees that I have to do at least 3 satellite contracts at some point through the series. So what we're doing is we're launching Relay 1. Again, standard launch procedures. Over to the east, here comes our upper stage that fires. But since we don't have a capsule, instead we have a probe body, we're going to get a lot more delta V out of this upper stage. We fire up our apoaps all the way up to the, I think, almost the altitude of the moon, about 11 million meters. And then you saw we jettison the nose cone, and we begin to adjust our orbit to meet that contract. Fortunately, on our first burn here, we didn't quite get it, and I forgot to include a MechJeb module, so we're doing this all by eye. Fast forward myself over to this maneuver node, and then we're going to go adjust our orbit so that we can complete that contract. And then, once that happens, I got a brilliant idea. I noticed that we had plenty of fuel left in this rocket, so why not go ahead and complete Relay 1 and ComSat 1 or MapSat 1 in one mission. So I added those little MapSat devices to the probe in the beginning without really the intention of actually being able to use them. But I decided to put them on there anyways in case I got the opportunity, and lo and behold, the opportunity arose. So what I did here is I added a maneuver to give me an encounter with the moon to complete yet another contract. My other contract was to fly by the moon, and with this opportunity in hand, I couldn't say no. So I added that maneuver, got my encounter with the moon. Here I'm adding another maneuver, which will put me in a near polar orbit of Kerbin, to which I can set up my MapSat. So I got that set up. Go ahead and time warp to the maneuver, make my burn, and then we're set in a very, very, very elliptical orbit around Kerbin that's nearly polar. So what I do is once I'm out of the influence of the moon, I fast forward and I begin a burn right at my periaps to set me up in a 90-degree inclination orbit. And then I burn retrograde to bring that apoapse down. So I think my final orbit's somewhere along the lines of like 150 or 120 kilometers by 120 kilometers. So it's a nearly circular orbit at just the right altitude for a map satellite. And then once that's set up, I jettison the booster or the rocket engine, and here we have our final MapSat-1. But it's not quite MapSat-1 until we name it MapSat-1. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will conclude today's episode of Kerbal Space Program Career Mode. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.